The body decides, not the mind. For a long time, people believed that the power guiding their lives lay in their thoughts, that making the right decisions led to the right decisions, and that making the right decisions resulted in a right life. This was taught and repeated, but modern neuroscience, trauma studies, quantum biology, and even simple observations in daily life reveal a far more disturbing truth. The most important decisions of your life are made more than once in the moments you think you are thinking. This idea isn't new. It's just been ignored for far too long. In ancient Greece, Epictetus, speaking with fragmented intuition, said, "Men are governed not by events, but by the marks they leave on their bodies." But today, neural system maps, vagus nerve studies, and subconscious reflex measurements show us this clearly. The mind is often just a narrator, a voice justifying the decision. Consider a scene from a movie. The iconic moment in The Matrix when Neo dodges the bullets. While the mind is still debating between reality and simulation, the body has adapted to a different law of physics. A similar situation occurs in real life. While your mind is evaluating the available options, your body either tenses or expands, recoils or leans forward. These micro reactions happen in fractions of a second and are often imperceptible. Another example is the way you talk to a friend while driving. The mind is talking, the body is driving. This perfectly illustrates the somatic sign hypothesis of the renowned neurologist Antonio Damasio. Damasio showed that decision-making processes and shifts are initiated before probability analysis. That is, before your brain labels an option as good or bad, it produces a reaction or avoidance response to that option. If this differs from the probabilities of the options, the mind transforms it into a logical narrative. That's why you might sometimes say, "It makes sense, but it doesn't sit right with me." It's not actually recorded, it's your own speech. There are countless examples of this in daily life. You meet someone. Within the first minute, you feel uncomfortable. Your shoulders involuntarily tense, and you become breathless. Your mind immediately kicks in and produces explanations like, "Maybe I'm tired," or "I shouldn't be prejudiced." But the body separates the parts. The same thing happens when you're faced with a job offer, choosing a house, or deciding whether or not to say a sentence. The moment of decision isn't mental. The other person can see it. That's why many ancient teachings aim to train the mind, not the mind itself. Instead of giving their children long theoretical lectures, Zen masters correct their posture, breathing, and hiding. Because consciousness cannot be clear without bodily regulation. Bruce Lee's famous quote is not without reason, "Don't think, feel." This isn't a romantic slogan, it's a neurophysiological truth. Modern trauma therapies are similarly marked. As Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, shows, the body keeps a record of past experiences. The mind can forget, suppress, deny, but the body doesn't. And these records categorize your future decisions. Sometimes you can't understand why you keep entering the same relationship over and over, why you avoid opportunities, or why you support something when you're about to move forward. Because the moment of decision occurs far below mental awareness as a defense mechanism. Quantum biology opens a fascinating door to this fundamental problem. At the cellular level, the body perceives growth only on a non-chemical level. The heart's capacity has been measured to be many times stronger than the surrounding space. Therefore, "My heart doesn't want to do this" isn't a metaphor. The body is actually emitting a different signal, and this signal filters your perception, your attention, and therefore your decisions. That's why some people speak very little but change the atmosphere. Some don't use persuasive sentences, but their words are taken seriously. Because they work with the packages presented, not the decision options. That's where the impact of silent people comes from. They don't contradict their bodies. Their minds and bodies vibrate in the same direction. The main point is this: even if your body saves itself, no matter how positive your mind thinks, your decisions will be shaped by fear and avoidance. Therefore, simply changing your thinking isn't enough. The nervous system needs to be regulated. Slowing your breathing, lowering your shoulders, slightly opening your chest. These may seem small, but they are radical changes in the decision-making process. Observe yourself immediately. What do you do in critical moments in your life? Were you tense, or were you successful? Did you want to escape or approach? At that moment, the real decision was already there. The mind isn't just working on the permanence of that decision. And perhaps this is why this knowledge hasn't been taught for so long. A person who can distribute and regulate their content is not easily manipulated. They look not only at what is said, but also at the people involved. They don't react, they choose. You understand that it's not the mind that moves, but the decision. Control shifts from the external world to internal systems. This is where real power begins. Subscribe to this channel to share this information with others. And if you're already subscribed, write "I've decided" in the comments section. The mechanism of choosing, not attracting, reality. For years, people have been taught, if you change your thoughts, you change your reality. If you see the right emotion, life will respond. In enough places, the universe will give it to you. However, while this explanation seems promising, it is incomplete because the fundamental mechanism of reality is not attracting, but choosing. The universe doesn't bring anything. It makes one of the already existing possibilities sustainable, and you enter that version. Although this difference seems small, it radically changes perception. The idea of attraction begins with what is lacking. I don't have it. Let it come to me. But the idea of choice is much quieter and more powerful. This already exists, and I am on the same frequency as it. Therefore, while some people strive to move forward, others desire, wish, and want to remain in the same place. The issue is not the plan of the problem, but which version you are compatible with. Quantum physics emerges at this point as a metaphor and transforms into a mechanical change. In Hugh Everett's multiverse approach, the analysis assumes that existence is simultaneous. You are the one who succeeds. You are the one who gives up. You are the one who finds peace. You are the one who constantly struggles. All exist simultaneously. Reality doesn't create one of these possibilities. You determine the dimensions, the details of which inner accumulations you refine. Therefore, the issue isn't what you want. It's which state of existence is active. One of the best scenes illustrating this in cinema is in the film Interstellar. When Cooper realizes the accuracy of the timelines, he doesn't try to change the past. He communicates with information that already exists. There is no dramatic creation there, only access. The situation is the same in real life. You create a new life. You can access an existing timeline. We constantly see traces of this in daily life. Consider two people living in the same city, at the same economic level. One constantly encounters opportunities, while the other says nothing is happening. The difference between them isn't intelligence, luck, or more effort. The difference lies in the fundamental state of their bodies and the elongation of their nerves. One person perceives the world as a threat, while another perceives it as a space. And this perception determines which people they will encounter, which possibilities they will discern, and which doors will be visible to them. The cell studies of the renowned neurologist Bruce Lipton can support this at a biological level. Cells activate their genes according to the response they produce. So genes are not destiny. Perception determines how genes will function. At the human level, this corresponds to the same event, producing completely different results in different bodily states. A body in a state of fear chooses the opportunity as a threat. A body feeling safe chooses the same event as an opportunity. The critical point here is that it doesn't feel like a decision is being made. It is usually silent, imperceptible, and continuous. It's not the right time. The conditions aren't suitable. I should wait a little longer. These are explanations from the mind, but the real choice is made much earlier, in the body. When breathing becomes shallow, shoulders tense, and chest droops, the system locks into a specific timeline. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus's quote, "It is not the events that disturb us, but our reactions to them," perfectly aligns with modern neuroscience. The event itself is neutral. It is the reaction that makes the choice, the one that fails. And this reaction, as it is repeated, becomes a frequency. This is why some people work positively and fall further into the trap. Because old signals already present in the body are being broadcast. The field responds to segments, not words. If the heart rate is irregular, if the breathing is regular, if the muscles are tense, what is said doesn't matter. The chosen timeline doesn't change. When you apply this mechanism differently, your relationship with life changes radically. Instead of asking, "How do I attract attention?" ask, "Which state of mind am I choosing right now?" This question takes you much deeper than thought, to the body. Because the choice is made not with thought, but with the state of mind. This is why Zen masters constantly focus on a single breath. When the breath changes, the state changes. When the state changes, the choices change. When the choices change, reality begins to look different. We don't speak in chains. You can't force reality. You are in harmony with it. Perhaps that's why this knowledge has long remained outside of popular narratives, because saying you can pull involuntarily holds people back. But saying you choose gives back the responsibility. Choice is incompatible with interruption. Choice takes weeks. And ultimately, it is an uncontrollable force. The mechanism that chooses reality doesn't seek miracles. It doesn't need grand rituals, long lists, constantly repeated phrases. Sometimes a single moment is enough. The moment the breath softens, the moment a moment of relaxation emerges, the moment an inner feeling of completeness arises. This moment is a gateway to another timeline. And perhaps the quietest but most powerful truth is this: life doesn't test you. Nothing can be proven on a universal scale. You simply choose which version you allow to emerge. Reality comes. Reality is chosen. Why do most people live the same life? From the outside, everyone's life looks different. Numbers change, cities change, fashion and faces change. But a little more careful statistics reveal a surprising fact. The vast majority of people live almost the same life in different environments. The same fears, the same expectations, the same regrets, the same one-day phrases. And this similarity is no accident. A quote from George Orwell's novel, 1984, perfectly summarizes the situation. People think they are free because they cannot see their chains. In the modern world, the chains are visible. They function in the form of calendars, qualifications, social norms, and internalized fears. People live the same life because most never question the details of their own lives. The fundamental reason for this, which is scientifically significant, is energy conservation. According to neurologist Daniel Kahneman, the individual brain perceives the unknown as a risk and prefers to behave as automatically as possible. This means that most people continue to adopt, without questioning, the way of thinking they learned in a free environment, the types of relationships they observed in their families, and life scenarios that are validated by external factors. Because questioning requires energy, stepping outside the comfort zone means performance. The Matrix film explains this situation with a metaphor. People are unaware of their existence while living inside their capsules because the system presents them with a certain reality. Taking the red pill doesn't promise a better life. It simply means that reality remains unchanged. The reason most people live the same life is the relief provided by the blue pill. Familiar discomfort feels safer than unknown freedom. We see this very clearly in daily life. Marriages at the same age, similar debts, similar jobs, similar characteristics, the same expressions. I had no other choice. That's just how life is. Everyone lives like this anyway. While these expressions seem innocent, they are actually an expression of mental surrender. Because if a person accepts that they are living a life they didn't choose, the possibility of change arises. However, this standard also brings responsibility, and most people unconsciously avoid responsibility. Psychologist Martin Seligman's experiments on learned helplessness show that this cycle continues. A person constantly exposed to uncontrolled negativity will give up trying, even if there is a way out. From societal structures to the education system and the business world, many things teach people there are limits and they are permanent. As this message is repeated, people stop even considering that a different life is possible. In films, characters experiencing this breaking point are often portrayed as nonconformists. In The Truman Show, no one chains Truman because they know he's part of a staged performance. The windows are slightly ajar, but their dimensions are closed. For most people, the situation is similar. They are internationally free, but mentally they follow the same path. The critical point here is this: the same life arises not from the same circumstances, but from the same internal states. People living with the same fears make similar decisions, even if they are in different cities. The same need for security, the same search for approval, the same fear of making mistakes. As a result, lives become similar. The words of the Stoic philosopher Seneca further deepen this situation. People do not live by escaping their fate, but by escaping their fears. Most people live not because they truly don't want something, but because they imagine the cost of what they want and wish to reclaim it. And withdrawal is ultimately a transformation of character. In modern psychology, This is called the default life scenario. People automatically enter the options presented to them if they don't question them: school, work, debt, retirement, separation. This scenario exists not because it's bad, but because it's presented as the only option. The most important point is this: even if people are aware they're living the same life, they normalize it instead of changing it, because they prefer sharing their separations rather than being alone. The phrase, "everyone lives like this," hides individual pain with a collective veil. However, throughout history, people who created different things emerged not because they had different opportunities, but because they broke this automaticity. They too were afraid. They too experienced things, but they knew they had to do what the majority did. At this age, courage is more important than intelligence. Perhaps that's why living the same life is easy, while living a different life is unsettling. Because difference begins even before it starts in the inner world. It's impossible to expect a different outcome while maintaining the same reactions and thought patterns. And perhaps the most disturbing truth is this: most people live the same life because at some point they have ceased to be the true masters of their own lives. They blame time, systems, chance, or their own inner comfort zones to maintain their status. But life, very quietly, asks the same question every day. Did you really choose this? Or have you just gotten used to it? When this question is answered honestly, the same life chain begins to break, because it is a small but irreversible break, forever. And when this break occurs, for the first time it becomes clear: everyone lives the same life. Most people prefer to believe that another life is possible. Can the timeline change in 2 seconds? This question might initially seem exaggerated, even like a romantic self-help claim. For years, we were taught that life requires years, pain, sacrifice, and patience for major changes. However, both reported data and historical turning points show that change doesn't happen, but rather the depth of the decision is divided. And sometimes that decision actually produces 2 outcomes. Neurologist Benjamin Libet's experiments hold this secret. Libet discovered that the brain begins to perceive the decision signal approximately 300 milliseconds before people think they have consciously decided to act. That is, consciously, it's usually the person who notices the decision, not the person who makes it. This means that what we call the timeline is shaped by sudden changes in direction, rather than long periods of deliberation. We see this often in movies. In the film Inception, planting an idea in someone's mind is depicted as the most dangerous action in the story. Because once an idea is accepted, an irreversible chain reaction begins. In reality, the survival timeline is broken not by events, but by the moment perception changes. This moment is sometimes a sentence, sometimes a glance, and sometimes a silent awareness. Let's consider daily life. A person who has worked at the same job for a long time and resigns after a single phone call. A person who has been in an unhealthy relationship for a long time and wakes up one morning saying, "Enough is enough." Although these decisions may seem sudden from the outside, they are actually the result of a 2-second inner clarity. It is not time that creates the change. It is the end of indecision. Psychologist William James's quote perfectly explains this. The greatest revolution in our lives is the moment we change the way we think. This change usually doesn't take long, because the person finally accepts a long-standing but delayed truth. The moment of acceptance is short, but its effect is lasting. Here, the application of the timeline should be considered not from a mystical perspective, but as a scientific metaphor. The timeline is actually the sum of a person's life, reactions, and expectations. If these three change, the life lived also changes. And this change sometimes truly begins with a 2-second inner pause. I no longer agree with this. In The Matrix, Neo's choice of the red pill takes only seconds, but this choice completely alters his perception, his importance, his usability, and his destiny. The film tells us that change isn't a long process, but an irreversible decision. Staying on the blue pill is also a choice. However, it's a choice made with skill. Scientist Andrew Huberman points to the role of micro-moments in nervous system shifts. According to him, very brief reactions a person experiences in the face of stress, fear, or indecision determine long-term behavioral patterns. Therefore, a 2-second internal pause sends the message to the nervous system. We are now embarking on a different path. This is why much of our lives continue, because decisions are often postponed. They say, one day, when the conditions are right. But the timeline changes not by pausing, but by becoming clear. And clarity depends not on time, but on courage. This is what is described in books and films as the moment of enlightenment. It's not a character's deep thought, but hearing a sentence rising from somewhere. This life isn't mine. The moment the sentence is spoken, the external world hasn't changed, but the existing aspects of the internal world have shifted. We see this in small examples from daily life: getting out of bed, or going home when the alarm rings, deleting or closing a message, remaining silent or speaking. These micro-choices are visible rays on the timeline. People often expect big changes to be dramatic, but in reality, life changes in small moments. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "It is not the events that provoke you, but your reaction to them." The reaction is given in seconds, and when the reaction changes, the timelines also begin to shift. Will everything be resolved in 2 seconds? No. But in 2 seconds, an irreversible direction can be chosen. After that, effort and adaptation come into play. But if the direction is clear, the path reveals itself. The real question is, why don't people use that 2-second moment? Because excuses end at that moment. And excuses are the comfort zone for most people. Change is postponed, not because it is painful, but because it threatens our existence. But the timeline changes not with a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet inner sentence. I'm no longer okay with this. When this sentence is spoken, the universe remains constant, but the person changes. And with the change in the person, the reality of experiences inevitably becomes different. The truth about consciousness, never taught in schools. Schools teach and memorize mathematics, explain physics formulas, but the gifts of knowledge acquired through learning are almost never discussed. Yet, it is not textbooks that teach, think, decide, and experience life, but consciousness itself. The education system considers not only the records it contains, but also the awareness it can contain. And this is precisely where the truth about consciousness, never taught in schools, begins. Consciousness is not simply thinking, as most people are taught. It is the emergence of thought on the surface of consciousness. The work of neurologist Antonio Damasio reveals that a large part of our decisions stem not from comprehensive analysis, but from the emergence of growing emotional cues. In other words, Consciousness is a performance that allows for the expansion of logical distortions. This is not taught to us in schools because the system reduces the information that can measure the human being, not the inner components of the human being. There are scenes in films that point to this truth. In Dead Poet Society, instead of having his students memorize songs, the teacher gives them this message: find your own voice. This isn't academic advice, it's conscious reflection. As consciousness expands, the boundaries individuals draw also change. Education often teaches methods, but it doesn't teach questioning them. Carl Jung said, "Unless you are conscious, you cannot control your life and choose your destiny." Schools discuss concepts like fate, chance, and success, but automatic responses, conditioned beliefs, and internal patterns are almost never addressed. Yet the vast majority of people live the same lives over and over again with these patterns they've learned unknowingly. We see this very clearly in everyday life. Why does a person continue to work for so long in a job they don't like? Why do they enter the same relationship cycles? Why do they say, "That's just how it is, it will always be like that"? Because the conscious mind, unless questioned, accepts what it's used to as normal. Schools teach what's normal, not different levels of understanding. One of the most important aspects of conscious reality is this: people are often not as you see them, but as they are used to being. Long-term happiness research at Harvard shows that people's lives are characterized not by widespread success, but by inner harmony. However, inner harmony cannot be measured by exams. This richness is not included in the curriculum. The Truman Show illustrates this symbolically. Truman's world is orderly, safe, and planned, like the current school system. But as Truman begins to notice small inconsistencies, his consciousness awakens. Reality is not presented to him, it is what he perceives. Yet education often teaches conformity rather than different approaches. Another scientific fact is that the brain restructures itself according to repetitive thoughts and emotions. This characteristic, called neuroplasticity, can change throughout a person's life. However, schools are still run with the understanding of, "You are like this. This is your capacity. Your success depends on this grade." This corrects and expands consciousness. Another untold truth about consciousness is the power of attention. Nobel laureate psychologist Daniel Kahneman says that the human mind has a comprehensive attentional detail. That is, our reality is shaped by indirect focus. However, attention training is not provided in schools. They only complain about distractions. Nobody teaches students how to manage their attention. The result of daily survival is this: people grapple with problems from their past, but they don't learn to move towards solutions. When consciousness isn't guided, it goes on autopilot. And people living on autopilot ask, why is life always the same? The famous line spoken to Neo in The Matrix is actually about consciousness. Don't try to bend the spoon. There is no spoon. This isn't a physical trick. It's a metaphor for perception. Reality isn't as rigid as we think. However, to realize this, awareness needs to see its own limits. Schools define the limits of these methods, not beyond them. Many scientists, especially quantum physicists, draw attention to the role of pervasiveness, observation, the resulting effects. This is not a mystical claim. It is a complete truth in all its components. However, this knowledge is presented only as theoretical information, not to encourage people to question their perspectives on their own lives. But the truth of consciousness is this: a person cannot learn without awareness. They only repeat. And a repeating consciousness cannot produce new life. What is not taught in schools is that success begins not in external development, but in internal development. People choose professions without knowing themselves, form relationships without understanding different things, set goals without recognizing their fears. Then it becomes clear why they are not satisfied. Perhaps the greatest deficiency is this: no one teaches us to stop. Silence, observation, inner awareness. Yet consciousness manifests itself most clearly in silence. A mind constantly filled with information develops noise, not consciousness. Thinking isn't enough. Who broadcasts the frequency? People have been told the same thing for a long time. Think right, and everything will change. But no one asks the question: who is thinking, and where do these thoughts originate? Because thought alone is not a source. It is the result of deeper systems. If frequency is collected before it is expended, it is not the thought itself that is actually unifying, but the data and emotional infrastructure that carries it. Neuroscience makes a clear statement here. The brain makes its decisions seconds before hidden thoughts. Benjamin Liebet's experiments show that the moment we perceive decision resistance as an action signal, this development of the brain has already begun. So, thought is usually a narrator, not an initiator. And what is the initiator? This is precisely where frequency comes into play. Frequency is the sum of the neural state of the crisis system, the emotional tone, the internal climate formed by past experiences, and the fragile harmony of the moment. Therefore, when a person says, "I am thinking positively," if their internal development is in a state of fear, expansion, or defense, the signal emanating contradicts their thoughts. The universe, life, or the people around them react not to words, but to success. We see this very clearly in daily life. And two people say the same thing: no problem. One person is genuinely relaxed, while the other is suppressing it. Even if the other person isn't aware of it at home, you can tell which one is being sincere. Because communication isn't just about words. It also includes tone of voice, body language, micro-expressions, and nervous system disturbances. It's not just the mind that emits frequency, but the entire system. Therefore, many personal development methods are limited when they focus solely on thought. Affirmations, vision boards. All of these can work at the mental level. But if the old elements are transferred to the body, the system produces two different signals, and nature always responds to the stronger signal. The movie Inception symbolically demonstrates this fact. In the film, ideas are effective not through suggestion at home, but when they are embedded deeper into the emotional core. Because if decisions are lost, it's not intermittent thought, but emotional reality. An idea must feel familiar rather than correct before it is accepted. Psychologist Antonio Damasio's somatic marker theory also aims at this. According to Damasio, the body labels certain situations as good or dangerous based on past experiences. While the mind debates the options, the body signals which one to choose. Therefore, it is not thought that emits the diminishing signal. That's all there is to it. Here, a critical question arises. If thought is not yet present, what initiates change? The answer is disturbing but true. It's what you're used to. Unfortunately, people aren't in a situation they're used to. When you wake up in the morning, the tone of your body, the rhythm of your breathing, the posture of your shoulders, your heart rate. These are all signals. And these signals shape your reactions to the details you encounter throughout the day. Neo's quote from The Matrix, "You don't need to break the rules, you just need to realize they don't exist," actually points to problems related to frequency. Neo doesn't change by thinking. The system changes by adapting to a different reality in terms of temperatures. Because the system isn't about adaptation, it's about sleep perceptions. Scientifically, updating the potential communication between the heart and the brain completes this picture. Research from the HeartMath Institute shows that the heart not only pumps blood to the brain, but also emits a powerful potential field. This field changes according to emotional state and interacts with the environment. Therefore, frequency is not an abstract metaphor. It is a measurable state of order. I'm thinking of an example from everyday life. Some people react fundamentally to changes in the atmosphere. No one can say exactly what they do, but they either soften or intensify the atmosphere. These people usually don't talk much. They don't make grand pronouncements, but they have bodies. That's the frequency. Silent, but effective. Therefore, the most misunderstood aspect of the law of attraction is the belief that everything is attracted by thoughts. Yet many people, the more they try not to think, the more they experience things they don't want, because the color of the body is the same emotional frequency. While the mind flees, the body continues to broadcast. Regardless of who is broadcasting the frequency, the essence of the content is this: not thought, but state. And state is the sum of the body-mind-emotion trinity. This is not taught in schools, in society, or even in most doctrines. People are told what to think, but not how to enter an inner state. Yet true transformation begins not with mental reconciliation, but with harmony in the zones. When a person is truly protected, changes occur in their characteristics. In a person's truly valuable cells, the goal already becomes clear. When a person is truly calm, the right solutions develop spontaneously. In conclusion, thought is a command, but the system that executes it is frequency. And what is recorded is the inexpressible state of your personality. Now, the real question is not what you consume, but what state you are in. Because life responds not to thought, but to the broadcast. What does the quantum field respond to? For years, people have believed, if you think right, the universe will respond. While this sentence seems hopeful, it is incomplete. Because the quantum field responds not to thoughts as we imagine, but to the parts of the parts. That is, it's not the sentences you construct in your mind, but the internal state carrying those sentences that responds to the signal shown to your body and nervous system at that moment. Unless this difference is understood, people will continue to live the same cycle. They wish, they hope, they repeat, but the result is permanent. Because the quantum field is not a system that works like a wish book. It is a reflective field, and it only reflects quantity. In physics, the concept of field does not mean organization. It means precisely an order in which everything potentially exists. The quantum field is a field of probabilities that have not yet taken shape. But these probabilities are not random. They are determined through resonance. Therefore, what collapse means determines how often you will be stable. In this context, the famous double-slit experiment should be recalled. Electrons behave like waves when observed, but transform into particles when observed. However, the important point here is not looking. Image systems exist. The quantum field is not intentional. It responds to interaction. Humans are exactly like that. Internal distribution functions as a measure of the field. So what is this situation? It is not thought, because thought is transient. Emotion is not solitary, because emotions fluctuate. The field reacts to your usual state. That is, how you feel for most of the day, what tone others experience, what mode your nervous system is in. This is the signal that the quantum field detects. Neurologist Joe Dispenza often emphasizes a fact. While people yearn for a new future, their bodies remain in the past they lived. Even if the mind says, "I have changed," the body retains its known owner. But the quantum field does not work intentionally. It works through memorization. Because the body is the concrete manifestation of the subconscious. This fact is often symbolically depicted in films. In the film Interstellar, time isn't just a line. It's constructed as a structure made up of different layers. The moment Cooper reaches his daughter is the moment the strongest emotional bond is formed. Because this isn't information, but an emotional exchange that transcends time and space. This is a powerful metaphor for how the quantum field responds to solutions, not logic. There are countless examples of survival in daily life. Some people experience the same results over and over again, no matter what they want. Jobs, relationships, opportunities are permanent because internal conditions don't change. The field is concerned with you, not with what is said. If a person constantly repeats thoughts of abundance while consistently exhibiting laxity, insecurity, or haste in progress, the signal from the quantum field is scarcity, not abundance. Because the system reads the current situation, not the words. Therefore, studies on heart-brain sleep are extremely important. The heart experiences a stronger potential field than the brain. This field is based on emotional state. Fear, stress, and haste create a state of pause. Trust, calmness, and continuity also create pauses. The quantum field responds precisely to these developments. One book discusses Viktor Frankl's experiences in concentration camps. Frankl observes that even those who have lost their sense of self have a higher chance of survival when they find inner meaning. This is because their bodies transition from a state of despair to a state of meaning. In quantum terms, he says, the field complements their responses to the inner harmony they contain. There's a critical misunderstanding here. The quantum field doesn't reward. It doesn't know right or wrong. That's a perfect match. Just like a radio broadcast. You can broadcast from any station you want. The radio doesn't care what you want. What matters is where the switch is. The quantum field is the same way. Therefore, people sometimes experience things they never wanted and ask, why? The answer is brutal, but not clear. Because your system is still attuned to that experience. The field doesn't try to break it. Therefore, it sustains it. Consciousness intervenes temporarily here. Awareness isn't about changing thought. Awareness is about the situation being different. Notice the rhythm of your breath, the tone of your body, the inner length or openness. The field perceives this. In a way, you may have noticed that when everyone is tense, the only person who remains calm softens their surroundings. That person does nothing. They don't speak. They don't intervene. But the field changes because the quantum field stabilizes not at the same time as the signal, but simultaneously. Consequently, The quantum field responds to what you experience, not what you want. The situation you are in, not your exhaustion. What you carry, not what you say. True power lies not in forcing thought, but in harmonizing the nervous system and the emotional field. Because when harmony is achieved, probabilities collapse spontaneously. Therefore, the real question is not, what do I want? But rather, what state am I currently emitting? The quantum field hears the answer to this question very clearly, and it always responds without question. Why are the powers of silent people more effective? In the outside world, power is often perceived as noise. Those who speak loudly, frequently express themselves, and are constantly visible are assumed to be more effective. However, studies of history, science, and human psychology show that true influence is often seen through interruption. Silent people speak less, but leave a greater impact because their power lies not in themselves, but in their manner of being. There is an important truth about this in psychology. The human brain perceives the ability to calm down and relax more strongly than constant stimulation. Interruption attracts attention briefly, but does not leave a deep impression. However, silence shapes the mind, and this shaped perception deepens the other person's understanding. Therefore, the presence of silent people changes the tone of the environment without changing themselves. As Susan Cain emphasizes in her work, Silence. Introverted or silent people generally think more deeply, observe for longer periods, and give fewer but more meaningful answers. This ensures that their words are rare but coherent. While the words of a talkative person flow by, a single sentence from a silent person can remain in the mind for days. In films, this power is often depicted symbolically. In The Godfather, Michael Corleone isn't someone who shouts or threatens. He's silent, waits, listens, and when he speaks, everyone else falls silent, because silence creates performance. This is part of the life cycle of the human mind. The silent person makes room for the other, and this space is often more dominant than words. From a scientific perspective, the nervous system of silent people is generally more organized. Constant talking, defending, and self-affirmation are products of perceived increasing threats. However, the silent person usually doesn't feel the fatigue of self-affirmation. This indicates that they are internally more secure. This security is subtly provided to people, and people gravitate towards it. There are very clear examples of survival in daily life. The presence of a person who remains silent while everyone else speaks in a meeting creates a great weight. That person hasn't said anything yet, but everyone wonders what they are doing. Because silence creates expectations, and expectation is the basis of power. Neuroscience distinguishes these events through their mirroring aspects. People unconsciously mimic the person opposite them. A quiet and calm person causes interruptions to slow down, allowing the individual to contemplate and unconsciously register their own rhythm. Therefore, the power of silence increases. Throughout history, problems related to great differences have been addressed with the same perspective. Marcus Aurelius, in his writings, displays unpretentious, simple, and profound wisdom. Power comes not from increased dispersion, but from the individual's harmony. Lao Tzu says in the Tao Te Ching, "The strongest is the one who exerts the least pressure." Silence does not pressure people, it guides them. The power of silence also comes from selectivity. A person who can react to everything conserves energy. Not reacting is not weakness, but a sign of generality. Because a person who reacts to a stimulus relinquishes control to the outside world. But the silent person is the master of control. In the modern world, this power is often misunderstood. Silence is confused with indifference or shyness. Yet most silent people observe their surroundings very carefully, read people, and discern what is truly important. This leads them to make more accurate decisions. Another important point is this: silent people allow themselves to be reflected. Because they don't fill the void by speaking, they place themselves in the void consumed by the other party. This is one of the hidden effects of silent people, known in psychology as the reflection effect. From a quantum perspective, silence means low noise, high sound quality. The field responds not to the strongest signal, but to the signal of signals. The inner world of silent people is generally more orderly. This is effectively applied without being differentiated from their existence. In daily life, most people who consume the energy of change are silent. They don't influence by speaking. They give through their existence. The rigidity they enter softens the atmosphere. The tempo slows. People stay home more. This is a form of leadership, visible leadership. In conclusion, the power of the silent person is in the state of being, not the situation in the displays, not the show in the state of balance, not the reaction in the echo, not the body. Therefore, silent people speak little but leave a deep mark. They don't try to convince the world. They rearrange the world's settings. Often, the most powerful changes occur during the quietest moments. The hidden system activated the moment. You remember, there are moments in life when you experience something not as if you've learned something new, but as if you've remembered something very old. At that moment, a new idea doesn't arise in your mind. Rather, a mechanism that has long been dormant within you is activated. This is the moment when a deeply hidden system, which most people cannot name, is activated. This system works not through learning, but through remembering. Because its source is not in the external world, but in the deep layers of your consciousness. As Plato stated in his Anamnesis, man doesn't actually learn knowledge. He remembers it. The soul reveals what is already known when the conditions of truth are met. While this perspective may seem mystical in the modern age, it takes on surprising meaning when considered alongside neuroscience and psychology. When the brain settles into a new body, it doesn't create an entirely new network. It usually activates pre-existing but passive neural networks. Similar themes appear in films as well. What Neo experiences in The Matrix is not a transfer of power, it is an awakening. The moment Neo becomes the chosen one, nothing new is added to the system. The system begins to work differently for him because he remembers the truth. The rules are fixed. Neo now perceives the rules at another level. This is a very powerful metaphor for the activation of the latent system. Scientists explain this phenomenon with different concepts. Neuroplasticity research shows that numerous potential circuits in the brain, previously thought to be closed, can be instantly activated with the right distance and experience. Especially in moments of insight, those aha moments, a sudden and regular electrical activation occurs in the brain. This activation is more like unlocking existing knowledge than learning something new. Everyone experiences this in daily life. A long unresolved problem suddenly reappears. A copy of it while showering or doing nothing. Because when you stop suppressing it, the latent system kicks in. This system works with permission, not suppression. The moment of remembering usually comes with relaxation, calmness, and individual silence. The most characteristic feature of this latent system is how it works. It gets triggered. What triggers this isn't a mass of information. It's a year's worth of memory at the right frequency. A sentence, a glance, a movie scene, or a simple experience can open a door that has been closed for years. That's why some books not only inform, but also shake people, because they create not information, but remembrance. Carl Jung calls this the moment of contact between the subconscious and the conscious. According to him, people don't use a large part of their potential by forgetting. Here, forgetting means nothing. It means concealment, neglect, and covering up with poverty. The moment you remember, this repressed potential quickly emerges. With the takeover of this system, your perception changes. You look at the same people, but you experience them differently. The same events happen, but you react differently because you are no longer on autopilot. The hidden system transforms you from reaction to choice. This transition is silent but steady. Analyses from a quantum perspective interpret this as the choice of possibilities. All possibilities are already present, but what is experienced is different. Reality intensifies in the direction the idea resonates. The act of remembering changes the frequency of awareness, and the system reacts accordingly. What matters here is not effort, but harmony. That's why some people seem lucky in daily life. In reality, they are less organized. They activate the hidden system more frequently. This is because they are in touch with themselves. They don't suppress their inner voice, ignore their slowdowns, or underestimate their intuition. Remembering is not a rare miracle for them. It's said to be natural. When this system is active, the person doesn't force themselves. The flow begins. Decisions become clearer, opportunities become simpler, and goals become more meaningful. This is because consciousness no longer operates according to external expectations, but according to inner harmony. This significantly changes the person's energy. An important point is this: the hidden system is not taught, it is remembered. That's why it's not taught in schools, because it cannot be memorized, tested, or measured. But once experienced, it is undeniable. The person cannot completely revert to their old habits. After that moment, they return to their old self, because they have remembered once. In short, this hidden system, which activates the moment you remember, removes you from automatic responses, sharpens your perception, simplifies your energy, changes the changes you make to reality. This is not a power that can be hidden. This is a moment of returning to yourself. And contrary to what most people think, this is happening now, not in the future. Because it doesn't remember, it's not indefinite, it changes over time. The real question is, not when will the system activate, but when will it change when you are already active.